Let me just say this first and foremost. In my review of Inferno, I talked to no end about how it felt like we were building up to the end of the whole series. I can happily say, after seeing Death Game's Operator, that we don't seem to be quite done yet. So, first things first for any new viewers. The Werewolf game is a series comprised of now 8 movies and 1 television series about different groups of high schoolers forced to play a deadly version of the party game Werewolf. The rules are simple. Out of the group of players, 2 were chosen to be the werewolf and the rest are villagers. The villagers must determine and vote out the werewolves before they're killed during the night. In order to help them, certain villagers are given special roles with specific abilities. For this specific game, we have the seer, who can determine whether one player is a werewolf or a villager, the medium, who is told whether or not the person that was voted out last was a werewolf or a villager, and the bodyguard, who can select one player every night to be protected from the werewolf's attack. Now, the only way for the villagers to win is to eliminate all the werewolves. All the werewolves need to do to win is equal the number of villagers. Death Game's Operator takes a common thread that's been pointed out in almost, if not every single movie so far. That the real villains in the story are the ones up above. The people who both organize these games and watch them via the video camera scattered throughout the buildings. No matter what evil or pain they've had to inflict on one another, the kids have always justified that the only reason it has to be done is because of the people who put them there. The series has shown glimpses into the practices and mistakes of the group, the betting ring that motivates the werewolf game, and the vicious nature of debt collection by taking the children and family members of lost bettors and putting them in the game to cover their debt. Members who have thrown in ex-partners into the game, members who have let themselves be seen and then had to be thrown into the game themselves. We even meet one of the members in Inferno and see him watching the game near the end. Death Game's Operator, though, lifts the veil completely by alternating between the werewolf game being played and the operators running the game, showing us exactly the approach behind the game's logic, but also revealing that even the people running the games might be victims of a different plot. If you're a fan of the series, especially a diehard one like me, then you'll probably enjoy this one. It's both a pretty good game of werewolf, and the inclusion of the operators adds a new dynamic for people who were growing tired of just the game. Which, to be clear, I wasn't, but I'm still happy to see the addition. If this is your first movie, I actually think you'll enjoy it well enough. Unlike Inferno, it doesn't have any other required viewing and does well to establish its emotional stakes and everything else that comes with it. Okay, spoiler-free review complete. Let's get thorough. The movie begins as we see a group of people wearing masks waiting for a white van to arrive. I actually think that the mask might be a new thing since there was a player in an earlier game who had seen a previous operator and forced him into the next game. So this may be to address that issue. We get to see a bit of the game setup, including all new metal shot collars to avoid that little cutting the cord issue that came up in Prison Break. And the fact that less than 5 minutes in, I have found 2 things that can, but not necessarily do, since I don't know what the production Bible for this series is like, can show that the series is aware of itself and trying to address the mistakes of previous games instead of letting them continue on. This is a wonderful thing, and one of the reasons that I follow this series like I do. The attention and consistency of it. One of the operators stops when he seems to recognize one of the players, but quickly snaps out of it and finishes their setup, leaving the building for another room where we meet the 5 operators who will oversee this game. The ladies, Himena and Karumi, the guys Kotaro and Masamune, and their apparent supervisor, Kido, who all discuss who's playing and what roles to determine who will watch them, specifically on the camera at all times. That's right, everybody. This time we get to know everyone and their roles before and during the game, which, while it may take away from one way of watching it, it does add tension to another. Masamune once again fixates on Yuzuki Natsume, the bodyguard, who seems to be the girl he knows, and leaves the room to compose himself. As he re-enters, the kids awaken. Some of them show immediate familiarity with this situation, while others are confused and lost. They examine their roles, and we see that Natsume is indeed the bodyguard, as some players comment on there only being 9 players in this game, and no madman, showing that they have played 4. They go over the rules, which are your normal rules with no special changes this time, but one player consistently fidgets with her collar until it shocks her onto her knees. While the kids are freaking out about this and arguing about the game in general, the operators are picking their favorites, and the ladies seem to favor the werewolves. As the kids go through introductions, we actually learn that some of them were invited to play in this game, while others followed internet rumors, and 2 players specifically were kidnapped. This leads to a funny moment between the operators where Kido explains that the invited players were invited because they're cute, which Kurumi thinks is untrue, but Kito says it doesn't matter what she thinks. After that, Masamune and Kotaro decide to take a break, where Masamune informs him that he knows Natsume and wants to help her. But Kotaro tells him that he can't do anything, and if he tries, they'll kill him with her. He also tells him that they, as operators, are no different from the players to the company, something he seems to know personally, since he implies that he was a player before he joined them. When they return to the room, there's two players claiming to be the Prophet. Amano, who we know is the actual Prophet, and Mio, the werewolf. Mio is such a good werewolf, in that she seems like she's a member of student government, or her parents are business officials, maybe politicians. She never stops smiling when she talks, and never says anything too abrasive or untoward. You can tell that she plans carefully every word that leaves her mouth to get people on her side and keep them there. I love watching her because she's such a master of controlling the room. Speaking of which, upon entering their rooms, we get an answer to a question that I never asked. The game does indeed provide them with undershirts and underwear for the duration in what looks like convenience store packs. After a small bit of character building, we get to start the first vote. They begin by separating themselves into groups. Hashizume suggests that since he, Natsume, Hata, and Hayasaka were brought here against their wills, while the others volunteer, that they should be exempt since they don't want to die, but the volunteers were willing to. Taki then throws in that they should also remove the prophets, Mio and Amano, since they don't know which is real, leaving the options at 3. Ichinose argues that instead of such a lackadaisical approach to it, they should focus on who reacted poorly to their role, which prompts Tsueyoshi to accuse Hayasaka and Hata. After a small back and forth, Ichinose decides that they must pick between him and Hashizume as the time approaches for voting. This is legitimately one of the strongest gambles I think we've seen in a werewolf game. Or it's a very stupid one. Ichinose is a werewolf, so he should have a partner in this vote. But as even he points out, it's the first night, so they haven't met each other yet. He's either so confident or so suicidal that he's willing to cut the werewolf population in half on night 1. The vote does occur, and as it becomes increasingly clear that Hashizume is going to lose, he becomes increasingly aggravated until he's executed. As the kids go to bed, the female operators explain that they got the werewolves to watch over, so Kotaro and Masamune go on standby. Masamune decides to use this opportunity to finally do something good, even though he admits that he's doing it purely out of selfish reasons. He tries to coax an idea about what he can do to help from Kotaro, but Kotaro refuses to be a part of this. Masamune decides that the best thing he can do is provide a cheat sheet, a list of every player and their role. Before he gets an opportunity, though, he returns to the room to take over and finds out that the werewolves killed Hayasaka, who was the medium, leading the female operators to complement their instincts. As they switch shifts for the night, with Kito, Hibina, and Kurumi going to bed, Masamune decides that this is the perfect time for him to deliver his note, and Kotaro reluctantly agrees to help by giving him a spare collar that they can use to communicate. Masamune heads out and actually manages to tape the note outside of Natsume's window. After they find Hayasaka's body, they proceed with the results of the prophets. Mio declares Ichinose a villager, and Amano declares another. And after cleaning up the bodies, they begin the next meeting. Natsume immediately declares herself the medium, taking Hayasaka's role that the werewolves tried to remove. Ichinose seems visibly annoyed with this declaration, but Mio seems confused, as she presses why she would reveal that now. But Natsume declares that she feels safe to do so, since she knows the bodyguard is alive and will protect her, and that both the werewolves are alive. This is actually a really good play from a metagame standpoint. Since she revealed herself without contest, Ichinose and Mio can't pick her for the werewolf slaying, since the bodyguard will definitely pick her to protect. They have to try to find and eliminate the bodyguard first, which we know is actually Natsume, who can never protect herself. Honestly, this is a real strong defensive play on her part. But back in the game, the next vote begins, and the first vote is to propose that they eliminate the false prophet, which Mio and Ichinose agree to. This is, again, a very ballsy move, since Mio is the false prophet, but less ballsy than Ichinose's gamble, since she has a partner in this one. Natsume opens with accusing Mio with the simplistic reason that Amano doesn't seem like a werewolf. Again, don't just listen or read to what Mio says. Watch her body as she speaks, and realize that she is an experienced manipulator. Even here, she rarely loses composure and tries not to draw aggression onto herself as she shifts suspicion onto others. By comparison, Amano immediately begins to panic and pleads uncomfortably close and personally with others. Now think back and realize how many of the innocents in previous games do exactly this. In the end, the vote is called for, and Amano fails at a 4-3 vote. Natsume may have the answers, but since she can't reveal that, she needs to be able to convince the others that she's right. And unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be her strong suit. Amano's constant fidgeting with her collar seems to have broken it, though, and allows her to flee the area. The operators put the others in stun mode and chase her down, leading to Kino beating her into unconsciousness, before replacing her collar and executing her properly. Play proceeds as normal. Natsume decides to protect Haru, since they've lost all their special villagers and Haru seems to be on her side. Due to the same facts previously stated, the werewolves resolve not to attack Natsume, but instead opt for Momoko since she was openly against Mio. The murder of Momoko seems to visibly affect Kino more than one would expect, and he leaves to go to bed. Masamune and Kurumi have some time to talk and go over how the werewolf game became like this. Masamune seems to have worked on the system that they used to control and execute the players. When he designed it though, it was just for a high-stakes game of Werewolf, until the CEO and the gamblers kept pushing it, making it darker and more twisted until we're at the murder game we play now. Back in that game, Natsume and Mio take care of Monaco's body before Natsume declares that Amano was indeed a villager. Mio counters that Natsume must be Amano's werewolf partner, and she checked Momoko, who was a villager, but was killed. Natsume actually explains a really strong reason that Ichinose and Mio have to be the werewolves, and that Ichinose can't use any of the normal distraction plays because Natsume leapt on the position of medium so quickly after they killed. As Natsume is preparing for the day's vote, Masamune uses the TV to send her a message informing her to reveal her true role as bodyguard to gain their trust. That night, Natsume opens with exactly that, explaining why she lied to them. She explains that this is her highest percentage chance of winning. If she comes clean now, and they vote out Mio, then Ichinose has to either kill Natsume, clearing her of suspicion, and making himself seem guilty since she accused him last, or gamble on killing the one that Natsume doesn't protect and try to win the final vote. This is a smart strategy, but is entirely dependent on the fact that she knows who the werewolves are. If you ever try this gamble in a real werewolf game and you do not know 100% who the werewolf is, it will probably backfire. It also depends on her knowing who the werewolves are because she offers absolutely no reasoning as to why she suspects Mio and Ichinose. Ichinose, however, does use this opportunity to vote out Mio unanimously, and decides to gamble it all on the last vote, like he did the first one. Natsume votes to protect Haru again, and the operators discuss the danger and the position that the players are in. Masamune puts together that he's not the only one helping the players, and runs after Kurumi, who just left the room. She'd been sending information to Ichinose from the beginning, and when Masamune discovers her, she stabs him in the gut, stating that she'll be fine, that the CEO and the bettors don't care about an extra corpse or two. She begins to reveal her motivation, that she'd known Yuki for about 2 years when Himena attacks from behind, and uses the knife that was in Masamune's stomach to kill her instead, before using her phone to lie to Ichinose about who's being protected, forcing him to change his correct guess to Haru and fail his attack. In a panic, he then attempts to remove his collar and is killed. Himena reveals that Haru was in fact her little sister, revealing that every operator in this game seems to have some kind of personal attachment to one player. Masamune seems to be having some kind of emotional breakdown before showing the cameras that watch the operators themselves, letting us know that even though they might not be playing, they are in fact no more important to the company than the kids sent there to die. It's just another game to them. Death Game's Operator is an amazing and refreshing entry to the series. Like I said at the top of the video, I thought that we were approaching the end of the series, but this has shown that they have different aspects that they can explore, and they certainly haven't run out of different wrenches to throw into the games themselves. It also does an amazing job of showing that even though we've been conditioned and told every single time that the player's real enemy are the people behind the camera, this has shown us that while they're doing terrible things, much like the kids playing the game, they're doing it out of requirement and fear. As far as I'm aware, this is the last Werewolf game announced before the entire world shut down for a little bit. And Japan especially has been dealing with waves of the issue. I don't believe a new one has been announced to be made, much less actually filmed and set to come out soon, but hopefully there will be. And I will be here for the next one. I hope you will be too. I love you.
Could try to play, but you're never gonna beat me. Look the other way, what I'm doing ain't easy. Bloody and stained from the